What if I told you that one of the best ways to keep something from freezing is to freeze it? In this video, I'm going to show you one of the weirdest effects in physics. Freezing water releases heat. We're going to see why this happens and how it can mean the difference between an entire orchard surviving or freezing to death during a late winter storm. This year in April, late freezing temperatures in the western United States caused a complete loss of many fruit orchards due to the fruit blossoms freezing in the sub-zero temperatures. However, I had heard that there's a technique that farmers sometimes use where they'll spray water on their crops to cover them with a layer of ice in order to somehow protect them from freezing. This seems very counterintuitive. Why would a layer of ice keep your plants from freezing? Well, if you look this up online, you'll find a lot of people saying that the ice insulates the plants. But that can't be the reason. Ice is actually a much better conductor of heat than liquid water. So why do some farmers swear by this method? Well, to show you why it helps, I need to stick a water bottle in the freezer and wait. Now, before we continue, with summer in full swing and so many celebrations happening this year, I want to thank Raycon for sponsoring this video and sending me their bone conduction headphones. Whenever I need to hear what's going on around me but still want to listen to music, these are the headphones I use. Whether it's going for a walk, doing experiments, or just cleaning up in the lab. They sit right outside of your ears, and instead of blocking your ear canal, they use bone conduction. So the sound travels through the vibrations in your bones. That means I can listen to music, podcasts, or calls while still hearing what's going on around me because nothing's blocking my ear canal. And not only is this a cool way to transfer sound signals to your brain, but it's much nicer than regular earphones. I can stay aware of traffic, people, or equipment around me without sacrificing sound quality. They're also built for everyday use. You can get up to 13 hours of battery life, and they're IP68 waterproof and dustproof. So sweat, rain, and even sand isn't a problem. And what's nice is the no-bud design stays comfortable and doesn't slip while you move. And another nice thing is that Raycon delivers premium performance without the premium price tag. So their quality rivals the big audio brands, but at about half the cost. Over 3 million people already love Raycon, and they back it with a 30-day happiness guarantee. These bone conduction headphones are a great option for everyday listening. So click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/theactionlabbc to get 20% off. And thanks to Raycon for sponsoring. Now let's get back to our experiment. Now the goal here is to cool down this water until it drops well below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. Now we'll check it a bit later here and you can see that it's well below freezing temperature now, but the water is still liquid. Now the reason it's still liquid is because water doesn't freeze at 32 degrees or 0 degrees Celsius. That's just the point at which it can freeze. The temperature at which water has to freeze is about -40 degrees Celsius, which just so happens to be -40 degrees Fahrenheit. So for once in my life, the world can be united about the temperature scale. So if water can freeze at 0 degrees Celsius, but it doesn't have to freeze until about -40 degrees, then what's this in-between region? Well, this is the supercooled region. Thermodynamically speaking, in this region, the water would rather be a solid than a liquid. But the problem is that it first has to make a very first tiny ice crystal. And that takes a little bit of energy. It's kind of like an activation energy for a chemical reaction. But once that first tiny crystal forms, the rest of the ice can grow easily. Now, one way to lower this activation energy is to give the ice a surface to form on. Instead of having to make a tiny sphere of ice floating in the middle of water, it can simply start growing on the surface, so only about 180 degrees. That takes less energy. And if that surface has tiny scratches or imperfections, you can get an even smaller angle that it has to form, and so it takes even less energy. So rough surfaces tend to form ice more easily than smooth ones. Another thing that lowers this activation energy, of course, is temperature. The colder the water gets, the easier it is for that first ice crystal to form. Eventually, once you get down to about -38 to -40 degrees, the barrier becomes so small that the normal random collisions of water molecules are enough to create the first ice crystal, almost instantly. But above that temperature, it's really just a waiting game. Eventually, by random chance, enough molecules will get enough energy and come together in the right way to form that first ice crystal. But it might take seconds or hours. So that's where we are with our water bottle right now. If I take supercooled water like this and pour it on ice crystals, then it doesn't need any activation energy. So it spontaneously forms ice at the surface as I pour it. Also, if I take the supercooled water and hit it, I can give it its activation energy to form ice. And the whole thing can suddenly freeze. Now this is pretty cool and all, but what does it have to do with keeping plants alive during a freeze? Well, I mentioned that liquid water needs a bit of energy to make that very first ice crystal. It needs to get over that initial bump. But after that, it's all downhill. It actually releases energy when it turns from a liquid into a solid. So yes, you heard that right. Ice formation is exothermic. It releases heat. Although this sounds counterintuitive, it actually makes sense when you think about it. What do you have to do to make ice from water? You have to continually remove heat. If you don't remove the heat, you get no ice. So that should mean that if I can measure the temperature of this water bottle, when it suddenly turns to ice, it should warm up. So let's try it here.
Whoa.
And look at that, it gets warmer. It actually warms up by about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it gets back to 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, exactly the equilibrium freezing point of water. Let's try it again. So you can see my liquid bottle on the left here is next to another bottle that already started to freeze. So that bottle's at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see how it's much warmer than the one that hasn't frozen yet. But now if I hit the liquid water bottle, you can see it instantly releases heat and warms up to 32 degrees.
Oh, it's gone. Oh, look at that. Whoa.
This is just so mind-blowing to me. It seems so wrong to see water heat up when it's freezing. Now my water bottles could only get to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit before they started freezing. But pure water should be able to get to much lower temperatures before it's forced to freeze. So I wanted to see how close I could get to this theoretical limit of -40 degrees. If I reduce my water drop size, I'm statistically less likely to have many nucleation sites. Also, if I make the interface that the water's touching a liquid as well, then it'll avoid nucleation sites. So what I'm gonna do is put some small drops of distilled water on this petri dish of mineral oil. And then I'll set the dish on some dry ice so it'll start to cool down. This oil will drop to a way lower temperature than -40 degrees, but let's see how close the water drops can get to that theoretical point of -40. But how do I know when they're freezing with these tiny drops? Well, remember that freezing water releases heat like I just showed. So I can know exactly when they freeze if I see a sudden hot spot. So I'll measure the temperature of the liquid with my IR camera. And what I expect to see is tiny hot spots pop up whenever a drop freezes. So let's see what happens.
Whoa.
Okay, the first drop just froze, and we see a little hot spot show up that brought it back up to 32 degrees for that specific drop. There's another one. Another one. Okay, the last one finally froze. I was able to get to about -20 degrees Fahrenheit before the last drop froze. So now we're starting to understand how putting liquid water on something during below freezing temperatures could protect it. As that water starts to freeze, it releases heat that keeps it at 32 degrees, and it won't drop below that temperature. So water that's turning into ice is like a little heater that keeps whatever it is on at 32 degrees. So as long as there is ice forming on the plant itself cannot be below freezing. So let's see how well this actually works. So I went out and cut some daisies from my yard that are identical. I'm gonna put them in the freezer, but the one on the left I'm going to spray with pure water. And I'm spraying this with ice water, so it's not going to help it because it's warming it up at all. The water is already freezing temperatures. So let's see if this actually helps. Okay, I'm gonna wait about 5 minutes here. Okay, let's check the temperatures now. Whoa, look at that. Look how much warmer the one that I sprayed with water is. So I can see solid water on here. Now let's warm these up and see which plant actually froze. So the one that had solid ice on it didn't freeze. So ice protects plants from freezing. It really is true. But before you go spraying all your plants with water right during a freeze, this method isn't foolproof. Once you no longer have any liquid turning to ice, then the plant will continue to drop in temperature even with the ice on it. For example, in this experiment, I did the same thing, except I let all the water freeze, leaving the flowers at negative temperatures for a long time. And in this case, both flowers died. Also, if you live in a dry climate, sometimes the act of spraying the plants can make it worse because the water evaporates and cools down really quickly. And then that lands on the plant, cooling it down faster so it could freeze faster as well. So overall, this method does help, but it's like an art of when and how to apply the water to help the plants without making it worse. So let me know in the comments section if you've ever used a method like this to save your plants during a freeze. And thanks for watching another episode of the Action Lab. I hope you learned something. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, remember to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.